I suppose the makeup thing, you can't really get away from it in England. Whatever versions of the beauty idea of things, because, the youthquake, the 60s version of the Twiggies and the that and the other and this stuff. So there's always fashion stuff happening around you, and the glam rock thing, quite young, Top of the Pops in England in the early 70s, those kind of things. To see Mark Bolan and David Bowie on Top of the Pops, and then that kind of amazement. I jump back and forth about it. Was the punk and the post-punk thing, because I think it was the most seminal. That was the most influential to me. The madness of that.
I'm Jill Demling, and this is Going Rogue. Today's guest is the legendary makeup artist, Dick Page. Dick doesn't believe in words like age-appropriate, trendy, or seasonal. In fact, he doesn't believe in beauty rules, period. Makeup should be fun, not a chore, he once said. That devil-may-care approach, plus a sharp eye for color and detail, earned him a decades-long reign as one of fashion's most sought-after artists. From Susie Sue to Kate Moss and every shade of red in between, his fingerprints are all over fashion's visual memory bank. He's equal parts punk, philosopher, and paintbrush poet. And trust me, you'll never look at a makeup brush or a bare face the same way again. So hop into his makeup chair and listen as Dick Page goes rogue. And to see the images we discussed today, head to our Instagram, goingrogue.podcast. Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see me?
I cannot see you.
Oh, okay. Now this is I'm a little bit technically challenged.
I am too.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Oh, God.
It's been forever.
How you doing?
I'm nervous.
About what?
About this interview.
Oh, I thought you meant the state of the country and the government into fascism.
Oh, no, screw that. No, it's just, I do so much research, and I did like 8 hours with you, but I was finishing it up last night till 1:30, and I'm very like anal and OCD. So I have a lot of notes because, I'm not a natural podcast host.
Well, you know, quite natural. So it all sounds quite natural. You're very convincing so far then, if you're not natural.
Great. So thank you so much for doing this.
You're very welcome.
Even last minute, I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to be able to talk to you. Doing this podcast has been so fun for me because when you're on set and you're in it, at least for me, I was never able to be looking around saying, holy shit, Dick Page is doing makeup, Orlando's doing hair, and then, someone over there is the photographer. No, like Annie Leibovitz, all these amazing, yeah, exactly. All these amazing artists, what your medium is, what your canvas is different, but it's a bunch of artists. So anyway, you've been behind some of the most iconic covers of the past 3 decades, but more than that, you've influenced generations of artists who saw in your work something radically honest, whether it was a rawness, a minimalism, or just the fact that it felt real. Now, I know your body of work spans everything from brand partnerships to designer collaborations, and of course the runway, but because we don't have all day to talk, although I wish we could, today we're going to focus on editorial.
Okay.
So today in Dick Page fashion, we're starting not with a memory, but with a mood. So while researching you, I found myself laughing out loud more than once at the things that you say. I've named them Dickisms because you have all of these like incredible one-liners and quotables that you just drop like confetti, and you should definitely do some pillows. So I'm going to read some of them. Okay. We're veering near the tired question pit where all the boring questions fall. You should wear as little makeup as you can get away with, and it should have an ease to it, like you put it on while riding the bus. Invoking Kate is like saying Beetlejuice. It doesn't mean anything because it's Kate, and you're either Kate or you're not. Sometimes people ask me why I don't use mascara, and I say, why? General gorgeousness. Makeup is not a corrective tool. It's a creative one. And makeup should be fun, not a chore. Exactly. These are just brilliant Dick Page cocktail, backhanded praise, dry wit, something sneakily profound underneath.
Okay.
So where does that comedic yet profound sensibility come from? Were you always like that, or is it the therapist in the chair, the small talk on set type of thing?
That's a good question. I don't know. Part of it is like a chit chat. It's diffusing the situation a little bit in order to do your work and let people know that whatever we're doing is superficial. I'm not creating the permanent record. That's a photographer or the videographer or someone. I'm staff. I joked to Jimmy Paul about this. With the help, we know with the help. So the smallness of it is to lighten and diffuse the situation, and not to actually analyze, but rather to just engage in the superficiality of it. It's juggling to keep everything aloft and in the air and very light. I think that's what I try to do. And also it's defensive in the way that humor is defensive. I'm not a threat.
Right. That's interesting because, I've spoken to Jimmy, and Stefan Murray talked a lot about that. You're in their face too, right? It's a sensitive, it's their face. You're touching their face. And I find makeup with the celebrities to be a really tricky thing because they're so used to seeing themselves a certain way. Yes. Right. And then you're also like, I'm safe. I can't tell you what's going to happen when you leave my chair. But right now you're in safe hands, literally. Right. Yeah. Okay. So before we dive into the covers and the iconic shoots, I want to take us back to the beginning. Like so many of my guests, I'm fascinated by what draws someone to this world at a young age. So you've said you moved around a lot due to your father being in the Navy and grew up, quote, in the country, 3 sisters, extended sort of rented sisters that my grandmother adopted with my uncle's kids as well. It was very Wes Anderson. Do a cross section of the house and you had all the families living on 5 floors. Eventually we moved outside of Bristol in 77, which was the best part. It was the Queen's Jubilee. So you would think some people would talk about that and be like, I couldn't use the bathroom. There were so many people. There wasn't a chair at dinner. But you already feel your optimism in just you describing that childhood. What was that like?
Well, but anyone's childhood is the childhood they know. And
right.
They don't, and unless you are close to people who live in very different circumstances, you have nothing to compare it to. So unless you're orphaned and then thrown into a different world, you go to school with people who are generally in the same sort of circumstances, or you're surrounded by family like that. So you don't know until later that it was weird.
Right.
To be told you eat like an animal because you're first to the table, gets what's there, and that kind of chaos. Every family has versions of chaos. You could be an only child and live in a chaotic household. But with a gang,
right,
there's all kinds of things that can happen. So just, and you don't have a choice, do you?
Right. Were you always the creative one in the family, or was there another relative, someone older that you looked up to that had a little bit of something that you were attracted to?
My dad could draw. I saw my dad's notebooks when I was quite young, and he was good at drawing. And no one else really so much. My older sister Sue, I thought was really amazing. Like she had an eye and a hand, and usually something quite cartoonish and light, but she would be the one you went to turn out a birthday card or something because she could do that, and very capable and very kind of like instant, very confident way about it. But I was the one probably who really got super, super into it. The usual like drawing, dinosaurs, science fiction, right. Earthquakes, volcanoes, things you don't have in England. Right. Disaster films, sharks, just overactive imagination. But I guess that's where that will come from. Always drawing, always painting, never idle.
Right.
We're never still kind of thing.
Yeah. And you've said you didn't grow up with makeup in the house, but like many artists I've had on, you just described it. Not that it's an obsession, but the interest started young through the drawing, painting, and eventually discovering fashion magazines. And this is something I found with a lot of creatives, whether it was Mickey Boardman at the supermarket at 10 years old, a little gay kid looking at the Vogue magazines wanting to buy one, but knowing that would be weird if he did, or Jimmy Paul, who would sit in his room and memorize the captions of hairdressers. So it's almost like you don't have to be in a household like that. You don't have to be in New York City with arts. You will be drawn to it, or
Yeah.
it will find you. So
Well, for most of us as well, like growing up, the escape into film for pretty much everyone I know, everyone I've ever spoken to in any part of this industry, because that's so outside of most of our sphere that we just, the shock and amazement of all that. So fashion wasn't the thing for me when I was young. My mum was quite glamorous in her way, but I don't remember really being aware of it until much later and seeing photographs of her. I don't recall it so much when I was growing up.
right. And you said I was fascinated by makeup because I couldn't understand how it worked. Why was it there? What did it do?
Yeah.
Like, do you remember? I know you don't remember it necessarily on your mom at the time in person, but was it through the Doctor Who? Like, were you makeup, face and makeup?
It
something?
it's probably a bit of everything. There was the telly, of course, and then we had the Saturday morning pictures. Like we used to go to the cinema in the mornings on Saturday sometimes to see like weird reruns of whatever monster movies and American. God help us, like The Lone Ranger. What was that? Why was that in England in the 70s? Who cared? But I suppose the makeup thing, you can't really get away from it in England. Whatever versions of the beauty idea of things, because, the youthquake, we invented the 60s version of the Twiggies and the that and the other and this stuff. So there's always fashion stuff happening around you, and the glam rock thing, quite young, Top of the Pops in England in the early 70s, those kind of things. I've talked to Jimmy about that as well, to see Mark Bolan and David Bowie on Top of the Pops, and then that kind of amazement.
Yeah.
I guess it's part of, I jump back and forth about this towards the punk and the post-punk thing, because I think it was the most seminal. That was the most influential to me.
Right.
The madness of that. But I don't know what it was about I mean, I suppose seeing change in people, thinking about theatre, thinking about actors, or maybe, I'm not sure at what point this happened, when you watched something on the telly or watched something in a film, you were like, oh, wait, hold on, that's so-and-so, who you know from that. But the hair is different.
Oh, that's super interesting.
So maybe that's where the idea of recognizing character comes from.
Right.
So that probably predates fashion for me. I could be getting this all very, very wrong, but maybe that's what it is. But have you gone into the idea of therapy yourself? You're just pouring out this.
Well, it's just really interesting, because when I asked Orlando Pita, I started cutting hair because I didn't like the barber. And then it's like, but why? What was the fascination where you're cutting your substitute teacher's hair? And Norman Jean Roy with the picture, taking a picture over and over and doing it differently. So there's always something besides just the aesthetic of it. This is what maybe I should be a therapist to the creatives.
The question there is, how do you find your way into the thing that has kind of enraptured you in the first place or fascinated you in the first place? Some people don't. We know that some people don't. Some people are content to be observers, and the rest of us, hooligans, just barge in there like we have something to add to the conversation. And sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Many times we don't.
Yeah. And a lot of times the parents really not understanding it. And you even say, and we'll get to that later, about not knowing it was even a job. I mean, even with me, even thinking an artist, I mean, you're not Picasso, so can you make a living being an artist? But let's get back to 13 years old. Okay. So while most kids were delivering newspapers, you worked in a slaughterhouse. So I have a strange question about this. Because this is what I thought you might have seen at 13. Did you see the different shades of red in the blood there? Like, was there any fascination with that red at that time?
So the fascination of red was to the extent of the fact of the fascination of the red, which is the deoxygenated versus oxygenated blood that you see and how the different blood behaves as well as the color, because the bright oxygenated blood that lands on the slaughterhouse floor and kind of pools and looks slightly waxy and is vivid and brilliant, and then deoxygenated blood is almost black. Or appears. Of course, once it's outside the body, all blood is red in some way, but we're told that blood inside the body is black in absence of whatever other chemical interaction it has. I hope someone with a biology background chimes in and corrects this.
But that makes sense. They always say it's blue to red, different. Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah, super awareness of blood. Because I do have that funny thing sometimes when I see, not so much anymore, but you see blood in the theater or on stage and in film, and you think, nah. Mostly a texture thing as well as a color thing. But,
Yeah, because you say color is really more about memory. It's not static. It's about light perception and experience. Red can mean stop or it can mean go on then. But
yeah,
that's interesting because a memory of red being in a slaughterhouse
yeah,
already is a very specific, strong memory, I would think.
yes. Well, because, I mean, depending on if you grow up in the country and you're familiar with the idea of hunting and or fishing or death, blood, whatever, things that bleed. And even as a kid, you scratch yourself, you cut yourself, whatever, you see the blood, and you become aware of that. It's just a fact of being alive, mammalian life, that we bleed. And most things bleed. Actually, everything bleeds. So awareness of red is interesting. Do you know Anne Carson, the poet, wrote Autobiography of Red?
Oh no, but
That's
now I
interesting.
must read it.
Yeah, I came to that quite late. She's friends with a friend, and it's dense, and I don't think I'm quite up to it in terms of how she absorbs and involves the classics and how she writes. But that's a good one. So there's a jump forward in time for you.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I mean, we could talk about blood and red forever, but red does mean life. When you don't have it is death,
Yeah.
right? So it's interesting that people think of it as gory. Oh, you're bleeding, versus
Yeah.
that's good. If you weren't bleeding, there'd be trouble.
I talked to someone, it was a long time ago, I was doing a job in Paris, and I was trying to describe what I wanted to do with something in the look, and I said about, the blood under the skin, the sans peau, and then you'd say in English, very romantically, the roses in the cheeks. It just means blood. To have that
Right.
awareness of the blood close to the surface of the skin or more closer, brighter. And they were kind of disgusted, I think. But
Well, that makes sense with the cheeks.
exactly, pinch your
Yeah,
cheeks towards the
yeah.
blood. And not look consumptive, particularly, just sort of like,
Right. Oh my God.
flush. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay. I read that your creative awakening came through punk, DIY fashion, and music. You've said, I was in a theater group in school and we did everything for it. Sets, costumes, and makeup were sort of an afterthought. It was that DIY thing, which was very post-punk and new wavy. It was all just very make your own clothes and do your own music, cut your own hair because no one's got money. And you do reference music a lot, and almost that was the way into makeup.
Yes.
If music was taken out, do you think you would have been drawn in so much? It's so intertwined. You talked about it a little bit with the time period in David Bowie, and that in particular is, a man with makeup, which I didn't even think about, showing you that it's for everyone. It's not just your mother going out with your dad at night,
Right.
Well,
there's a funny thing also. This is a little tweak there's a book that actually Jimmy gave me by Susie Ronson about working with Bowie when she was quite young as a hairdresser and doing his hair and meeting Angie and being part of the group. And the whole thing where they tried to convince her to do the hair of the other guys in the band. And they're very resistant and very hidebound by this kind of like English blokey thing. And the idea of like putting on makeup and doing their hair and fixing their hair kind of stuff is like, so very aware of that as a cultural thing in the early 70s, even though a lot of the straight guys realized if they were kind of glamming up and looking glittery and stuff, they would get girlfriends and they would get laid.
Right.
And to the punk thing kind of like laid waste to most of that, although these things did bleed over into each other more than people remember, like the idea of Mark Bolan meeting Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees. And these things, we don't think culturally or stylistically, artistically, they run together, but they do. They all kind of crashed into each other because the time frame is so short.
Right.
Digressing. Yeah, the guy thing with the makeup. Where were we? What was I talking about?
How intertwined music and makeup are. And
I took it away.
Yeah. And were you going to shows and putting makeup on yourself? Because what I'm trying to get to is it's one thing to notice makeup and be fascinated by it. And it's another thing to start doing it and then doing it on other people. So how did you get from here to there?
It was, yes, it was that thing about going to clubs, starting to see bands, because when I was old enough, I guess, there was the kind of new romantic thing that was happening, which hilariously became a little bit uptight and po-faced. But when it started, I guess I was a little bit too young for this, but with Blitz and Billy's and clubs like that in London in the late 70s, it looked like a lark. It looked like people just a reaction to the punk thing where people wanted to dress up and look glamorous on nothing, living on nothing a week, living in a squat somewhere, but really going to town with their looks and going to clubs and making their own clothes during the week and to really show out, to turn up looking like something. Vivienne Westwood did a brilliant about face from her Sex and Seditionaries things with World's End, which was the pirate collection, which was Bow Wow Wow. And the pirate thing was so crazy. And I was very drawn to that because it was kind of nuts. There was a song called Louis XIV. There was all this kind of like brocade and pirate hats and tassels and glamour, but still a little bit rough and deranged. So that was what I aspired to. Even then, I think I got the idea that perfect wasn't very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Really quite dry.
And I guess if you're in that time period, if you're in that kind of group or band, like you're experimenting, originality is almost more interesting, right? Like seeing someone that's doing it different, or how, Jimmy, because you've brought him up in the drag scene here, like all of that, like the club scene here in the 80s. It's that type of thing too. All of that experimentation you're doing just for your look that night ends up leading to a career.
It's all quite strange. Yes.
Yes, it is. But at that time, so this is prior to you moving to London. At that time, did you see that being a makeup artist could be a job? Or are you still not thinking people get paid to do that?
Going back a little bit to what you said before about the credits in magazines and stuff, I started to see there were people doing things. So in England, there was Kay Montano, who was working before I was, and she was doing things for Just 17 magazine and for these other various like English magazines. And then, of course, in Vogue, it seemed to me at the time that every job was Sam McKnight and Mary Greenwell on everything in Vogue.
Right.
I was like, who are these people? Do they sleep? They seem to be doing everything. Even if there were other people's names who, of course, I'm much more aware of now. You mentioned Stéphane Marais before. Stéphane, I was seeing what he did in French Marie Claire specifically, early stuff with Peter that was so to me.
Yep.
When I first met Stéphane, I did tell him I ripped him off. That was one of my early inspirations was, and I don't use the word homage because it's so kind of like mealy-mouthed and I think patronizing, but so I just said I ripped you off and thank you.
Well, you're all going to be different. You're all going to be
different. Got to knit together. But I said to him like, oh my God, this was so incredible what he did. But that thing that Diane Arbor said years ago about the idea that you recognize something that you've never seen before.
I love that.
That you just go, oh, I know what that is. Because it hits you, which happens in film and it happens in music. And so the music thing, the association of that, the chaos, the drive, the being young and being kind of fired up. And the job thing was, no, I did not know that it was really a proper job until I saw these names repeat. And I figured, well, they're not doing it for fun. They are doing it for fun, but they're not doing it out of the kindness of their hearts.
Right.
They're doing it because someone requires them to be there.
Yeah. What did your parents, like, did they have a plan for you, or was there mother or father saying, yeah, no, you're going to either do this, or you have to pay your own way, get a proper job, whatever proper means?
No, not really. Because my dad left when I was in my early teens. And he was, I just know that it was the best thing that could have happened that he left because he wasn't really contributing to the household. You know what I mean? Not that useful in the way that men often aren't. And my mom was just really up for it. She was just like, she wanted us to be happy. And she would say straight up, like, I don't know much about this. She would come to parent-teachers evenings and want to talk to my, teacher, bless him, my history teacher. She would say, I'm a little bit concerned about the whole nuclear war thing, to be honest. So she would like just current affairs of whatever was going on, Chernobyl. So her thing was just like, was wide open. She was like, she wanted you to be able to like make a living. We'd all worked from quite young ages, but she wanted you to be able to make a living, take care of yourself, be happy. College never came up. No one's ever said you should go to university.
I think it's funny that you just said your mom would say that at back to school night, since you said something like that when we first got on today. About the state of it's just funny.
Well, because we live constantly with apocalypse in some shape or form in some corner of the world. So
exactly. Yeah, I just stay under my rock. It's safe there.
Yeah, as long as you never see any news media, listen to on the radio or television or pick up a paper.
Exactly.
Right.
So 1987, You moved to London and try your hand at painting faces, your
Yes.
words. But it was far from glamorous. You said, when I first moved to London, for the longest time, I wasn't making any money. I was working the night shift in a photo processing lab and walking or hitchhiking because I didn't have the bus fare. It was like lunch or mascara. Okay, so can you tell us about that decision to move to London? And did you go with the intention of, I'm going to try this out, and paint a picture of London at that time?
I did. I went to, like an idiot, I went to London with really no plan. A friend of mine, Tim Crespin, who's a hairdresser, who's also from Bristol, who moved to London before I did, and did really well, and was doing amazing editorial work and advertising campaigns and stuff. And Tim was really kind. He lived in, I think he might have lived in Balham at the time in London, in the maybe 85, 86, when I was visiting him, and he put me up, and I stayed with him a little while back and forth. I was trying to meet agents. And I went there in that way that you do in my early 20s and not really knowing what the hell was going on, and went to meet agents. And I'd done some testing pictures with local photographers in Bristol for local magazines, and a few things that were kind of cool, but really nothing. I joke that I wouldn't have had a prayer if I'd tried to do this now, because social media, the whole thing, everyone knows everything about everyone. There are,
Right.
Google you in a second and you don't exist. So I went there and I slogged around, and I got an agent with Z Agency, who represented kind of like the odder kind of models at the time. But the bigger agencies that I met weren't interested. Fair enough. And then I just started like doing what you do, trying to test and meet people, just doing
Right.
test pictures and meeting people. And then there was no immediate into fashion at the time. There were these papers, these magazines they gave away at the train stations, was Miss London and Girl About Town. I think it was called Girl About Miss London. Someone's going to correct me on this as well. I got a couple of little things with them. I did a couple of things for the Evening Standard newspaper, who had fashion pages at the time. But I was also doing my night shift at this Borehamwood photo lab thing that you mentioned. And I was living in one room in Cricklewood in a shared house, which was a bit of a nightmare. It was £35 a week. And I know, just again, it's
Hustling. The hustle's real. The
but
hustle
it's
is
funny
real.
because I don't know why. Actually, I don't know. I'm saying because I don't know why, but because something was happening, and there's this so kinetic forward motion. Something's happening. Something's constantly happening. It was possible to live on next to nothing, having come from a next to nothing background. I could manage that. So that's what happened, and I just kept looking.
Well, it makes sense, Dick, because you're just realizing that this is a job. So it's not like you're not doing it quick enough, or you're not doing the right steps, because you don't know what the steps are. So just working and doing your craft is something, and is more than you had the ability to do before. So when you talk about that forward moving, and a lot of people, some actors I've met, even if they're not getting paid, they can't imagine a life without acting, whether it's on a soapbox in the park by themselves or whatnot. It doesn't start out like that. It starts out like, I have to do this because this makes me, it gives me something.
That's interesting, because you're saying that, like, so I've heard, of course, actors, musicians, people like, this is the thing I have to do. And I thought I did not have that kind of compulsion, but I suppose I did, or had. Because it is interesting, someone saying, like, it's the joke of, gotta sing, gotta dance, which is a bit like you wrap the tablecloth around your head and stand on a chair and say, look at me.
Right.
And in that way that you also know of meeting actors, performers of whatever stripe, who insist that they're very private people and very shy. I'm like, you just walked onto the stage and ass naked in the Old Vic.
Right.
Shy
They're
person.
like, that was a character.
Yes,
it wasn't
exactly.
me.
I had someone to hide. It's not me, really. We've all got versions of that. So it is the projection and kind of like, but yeah, just like barging through it in a funny way.
And I feel like also for artists, yes, you have to make it work. And I think for me, when I was studying art in college, I loved doing it, and I would have loved to do that as a career. My problem was I didn't want to get rid of the things I had done. So for me, it could never have been a job because I was like, I just spent 3 months on this. Why would I sell it to someone? So there's that whole art and commerce thing too. I mean, it's a little different when you're doing it on someone else's face. You can't take that back home with you, but it doesn't feel like a job sometimes. So you're doing something you love and getting paid for it, hopefully. And that's a career, the best.
Yeah, and you're working with, I think, as you seem to know more about me than I do, the idea of it being so ephemeral and the temporariness of the medium is the great beauty of it, which simultaneously lets you off the hook while engaging you entirely in what you're doing. It's kind of great.
I have a whole section on Dick Page philosophy.
Oh dear. Yeah, well,
it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
But it's part of what I don't think, I'm a complete fence sitter Pollyanna because I won't commit to anything. But the essential fact of what I do is it washes off.
And there's freedom knowing that and believing that because it's true.
Because who cares?
Right.
You care enough for the moment of the thing. That's like, if we're going to really fall into our Simone de Beauvoir and our existentialism, sitting on our park bench in Paris sometimes watching life pass us and knowing this moment will never return.
Right. I've been thinking a lot about this, and just because it's top of my mind, it's, there is something about it. If you think about Jackson Pollock and the process versus the product as well, like the picture someone else took of your work in that moment, it's never going to be that moment except for the moment it was in, right? So you have a picture of it, but someone like Norman Jean Roy has no attachment, like you have no attachment to the work after it's done. He has no attachment to his archives because it is that moment. Okay, so let's get you to New York City. That's where everything gets... that's where you jump off, and the rest is history. Okay, so 1994, that's when you moved to New York City. So what made you decide to jump to New York? And then we'll talk about how fascinating it is that you said you got your covers while you were in New York and that you hadn't had proper fashion magazine work in London. But what was the turning point where you said, I've got to go to New York? That's where I belong, or that's what I have to do next.
It was Calvin. It was Calvin Klein. And it's all, it's woven together in this kind of like little knot in the early 90s, because in England I'd been working with Juergen. I met Juergen in the late 80s, Juergen Teller, and then Melanie Ward, who was like the prime mover of my life in a very gentle way. Who introduced me to David Sims and Corinne Day, so I was working with. So Chicken and Egg, Calvin Klein, Kate and Moss, because of all the stuff we all did with Kate, huge chunk of Kate with Corinne and then David and then Juergen.
Right.
And Kate going to New York for Calvin and then...
Okay. So let's unwind this because this is going to give us the timeline that I've been curious about. So Melanie... And she is the one that brings you into that the face cover shoot, right? Because Corinne's the photographer, Melanie's the stylist.
Yeah.
So that happens prior to moving to New York.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah. And then, because I saw a lot of your early work. Yeah, Corinne, even to Vogue is Corinne.
Yes.
Yeah, they all pop in like... Yeah. That whole group, whether it's Melanie, Juergen, Corinne, you know what I mean?
David,
Right. Each one is involved, and I feel like each of those first steps.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Okay, so sorry, I'm speaking for you, but I was confused.
I often don't know what it like this, like I said, there's that strange short time frame. So I worked with Juergen first, who I met. I don't know how I met him. I went on a go-see when, and he was shooting stuff for Vogue Homme, or maybe Mana Vogue, German men's Vogue we first did. And I started working with Venetia. And then I met Melanie probably around the same time because she was also with Z Agency. And Melanie introduced me to Nigel Shafran and Donald Christie and Corinne. And Corinne had been introduced to Melanie by Paula Bullwinkle, an American photographer who is now an artist, lives in the Pacific Northwest and is a painter, who I'm indebted to. Paul is incredible. and was a really interesting photographer as well. And it is interesting. She's across the board artist, a very good painter, interesting photographer. She teaches. And so Paula somehow knew Corinne, and then this kind of thing, so these are all things you say untangle. It's
and
like
do
that.
they say, like, why don't you try my friend Dick Page out? Is that kind of how it's that time period for all of you? There's so many of you that, are coming up. Like, if you talk about Orlando's beginnings and then Peter Lindbergh, I mean, you guys had the best group, of people all around that time period kind of coming up at the same time almost.
Well, it was largely the way that if someone says, "Oh, you'd really like so and so. I think you should meet so and so. Do you really like what they do? They do a really interesting so and so." And then you meet and you do or don't get along, or you don't get along, but you still work well together, or So with David, with Melanie introduced me to David Sims, who's going with Emma Balfour, and Emma's Australian model who was living with David at the time, and we clicked really amazingly tight. And then Guido came along and had known David was assisting other photographers, and then so we started working together. So at that point, as well as the aesthetic of how you understand what people have in mind for their work, it is to do with, you're going to have a pint with this person. Does it make sense? Do you?
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. What is more important? Because you are, and one of your quotes to younger generation that we'll get to is, know how to do everything. You're not going to have to, but know how to. So it's not that Juergen might ask you to do something that you can't do, but it's about that vibe on set, right? Like Mario Testino, he would always have his group just because they all worked, they knew each other. And it's more than just knowing their style, it's knowing their temperament. It's knowing what to do to almost save the day if there's a block or all of those things, right? Than just, I can do a great cat eye. I mean, I don't want to simplify it, but
but it very much is that. It's to understand also there's that point where stupidity and fearlessness are the same. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you can't really fuck it up. Because who's going to say? You just throw yourself at it. Like I did hair before. I never trained as a hair. I worked as a junior in a hairdresser salon for a minute. I'm a terrible hairdresser, but I know how to make it work in the camera. And I've ended up doing hair for people. Don't go around the back. Let's keep it pills. But I've done it. And I would say yes. The other thing is like, the power of yes, of like just, of course.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it.
And
your confidence. Yeah.
It was my second agent. I was a design photographer. I went to Debbie Waters. And when the people called from Calvin in New York, actually they called for me and Guido. And Debbie said later she thought she was being punked when they called. And they said, does Dick like doing shows? And she said, oh, loves shows, does them all the time. I've never done a show in my life.
Right.
I'd done hat shows for Stephen Jones. Stephen was really amazing when I first started working. I met Stephen, I think, in probably, I want to say 1989, 1990 or something. And he had 3 models and he showed on Lexington Street in Soho in London. And it was a walk up, probably 4 or 5 flights. And he would serve tea and cakes to the editors, and not very many of them could fit in the atelier at once. And I would go and put the hair back in a bun and do a bit of makeup. And they would show in the morning, like midday in the afternoon, his hat collection. So that wasn't really a show. It was like 3 models. One of whom was Julia.
It's semantics. Yeah. Semantics.
Julia went on to become an artist and an amazing, such a great beauty, and is a great DJ. Princess Julia now in London is a great DJ, and of course still a raving beauty. But Julia, with this genius thing, we would go for a swim in the YMCA baths in Soho in between shows, and Julia, with full beat, would do laps, her head out of the water.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Okay, so now you're in New York. Yes. No formal training, what we've talked about, which is also a trend I've discovered. The most creative of creatives. Those who either rejected or were rejected by the old-fashioned beauty schools at the time. Like the same thing where it's like blue eyeshadow for the blue eyes, and Stefan talks about it too. It's like the people that stayed in those schools definitely are not famous makeup artists right now. It's just anti what you would think would make sense in having a school where you're supposed to be expanding people's creativity.
Well, there's a funny thing, because I did actually get into the Western Supermare Technical College after a couple of years to do beauty. And I was the first boy ever accepted there. And it didn't last, I don't know, half a term, because it was what you were talking about. It was this, and this was this. But mostly it was, as every beautician knows in any field, it was super technical. It was a lot of the science and the biology behind skin diseases and this and that and the other and this kind of stuff. And it was more in the world of science and dermatology, and the aesthetic was an afterthought.
Interesting.
When you realize you can't teach an aesthetic.
Right.
You can teach the style of an aesthetic, but not an understanding of how it works in the world.
Right. The only way to do it is to not say it's good or bad. That should be the freedom of experimenting and finding your aesthetic. It's like any art class now. It's like when they grade you, I'm like, how can you grade my surrealist painting, you landscape artist professor? You know what I mean?
You go to the museums. The great thing about growing up in England is amazing museums, amazing theatre and stuff. And so we would go with our art teachers to the museums. There was a very good museum in Bristol, and also we would go to the Tate and to the National Gallery and stuff on school trips, and then do a little sketch. And they'd park you in front of something to look at, and you'd be in front of Millet's Ophelia and thinking, you haven't got a prayer. Good luck with that. Have a little go. Or you look at Henry Moore and you think, that's more like it. I could do that.
Exactly.
That looks like pipe cleaners and clay. I can manage that.
Well, you talk about going around with this book, and I know we're jumping around because the timeline, I was getting a bit confused. So when you are in New York, you were talking about trying to go to these magazines and that you'd have to just call and show up and then no one would see you. And Stefan Murray talked all about what that was like going to these magazines. I can't even imagine just the fear of what the note was going to say. Mark Seliger talks about it too, dropping your book off at different magazines, and he still remembers the person who said, you're not right. And he wouldn't tell me the name because they must still be in the industry. But people that don't know what the world was like before iPhones and Google Maps and all of that stuff, that's a hustle. Do you have any memories or stories about that?
There was no note. So you would take your book somewhere to drop it off for someone. And I got to the point, I would put a little piece of paper tape between a couple of the pages of my portfolio. And invariably I picked it up and the tape wasn't broken or hadn't moved.
Oh,
So no one had even opened it.
oh my God.
I don't know where that came from, but isn't that strange? You're like, why bother?
Right. That is terrible. So you've talked about doing your time in the trenches, long days, unpaid gigs, insane pressure. As we both know, this industry is highly competitive and no one retires. Let me repeat, no one retires. It can also be very toxic, especially back in the day. And you are your own HR. There is no one on set saying, don't yell at hair and makeup.
Well, I've thankfully, knocking on my dining table, thankfully, not that much of it. It sounds a bit flip, but I'd say I've done a million jobs. I worked in a slaughterhouse, I worked on a farm, I worked in a supermarket, I've been a cleaner, a janitor, I've done all sorts of things. And there's bitches everywhere. And there's nice people everywhere. With the grace of the way the industry works, I've been in a few situations where mostly the unkindness, punching down, which I find unbearable. So when people are awful to their assistants or to staff or to throwing shit and stuff, then you just, as graciously as possible, remove yourself from the situation. There had been a couple of photographers remaining nameless,
right,
to protect the guilty, that I didn't go back because it become complicit.
Exactly. I think it is the hair that probably gets it, because as you say, and I never really thought about this, yes, you can do a change really quickly, where the hair, not so much.
Yes, rebuilt. I mean, makeup for the most part, unless it's some great dramatic number, can be fixed and corrected and revised for whatever. But also, outside of the practical material fact of what you're doing and changing and stuff, is just the atmosphere and the feeling. If you're working inside an atmosphere of distrust and unkindness, and God help us, fear, if there's models reduced to tears or the assistants are like cowering in a corner somewhere, that's just nasty.
No, I know.
And there's no need. Because because there is a need. And like years ago, I don't remember who it was, an assistant on a shoot, and was talking about whoever the demon editor was at the time, just really being unkind and just saying, you know what? It's just a fucking top and a skirt and a pair of shoes.
Yep.
That's it. At the end of the day, it's a top and a skirt and a pair of shoes.
For me, that's what it was. I mean, I fell into the job and my dad was a burn-in trauma surgeon. So for me, it was like there was so much perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If I was so upset each time something like that happened, I'd be fully gray at like 30. I mean, I started there at 24. So imagine being fully gray at 26.
Right.
But let's talk about the face. Heaven is real.
The funny thing about Heaven is Real is there's the opening spread of that story is Kate she's wearing an Afghan coat, and she has her eyes open in one picture and her eyes closed in another. It's a beautiful spread. And Phil Bicker was the art director of the face at the time, and Phil's an amazing art director, and he's the one who worked with Corinne to do the layout on that. And Kate's wearing a little, kind of lucite plastic badge on the coat that says Heaven is Real. And that was one of a bunch of badges that a friend of mine who I lived with at the time in Cricklewood had brought back from Africa from a prayer revival meeting.
Oh, wow.
That's where the story came from, this little badge that she's wearing.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
A badge that says Heaven is Real.
Oh,
So
my God.
I don't think I've ever told anyone that before, probably because I forgot. So that's what that's the badge, and that's where the idea of the story came from.
And that was Kate's first shoot or not Kate's first shoot?
No, Kate had already done a face cover.
Okay.
Owen Scarbina, maybe the one with the football under her arm, which I think was a few months before. And then there was the Third Summer of Love one, which is Melanie and Kate with the feather headdress on the cover.
Right.
And then we did Heaven is Real with Kate and Lorraine Pascal. And
Okay.
Kate and Lorraine together, and Lorraine with a buzzed head looking very beautiful. Because she is beautiful. And Lorraine went on to be a chef in England. She was on the telly doing chefing and cooking and stuff, and she's kind of amazing.
It is really interesting that I never even think about the timeline as far as you could be on your first set, but that could be different from the first shoot that comes out, right?
Yeah. It's like when filmmakers you talk to an actor and they say, oh my God, Daniel Day-Lewis had 4 films this one year. Well, he made them over an 8-year period.
Exactly. Okay, so let's get to Vogue.
Yes.
Not to say Vogue is better than every other magazine, but Vogue is what we're talking about. So many of my guests talk about the importance of Vogue. Obviously, magazines at that time, there's no Instagram. So that's what people are seeing. That's your book. That's your resume. So do you remember your first shoot with American Vogue and what Vogue meant at that time versus the other magazines? And was it something you really wanted to do, or did it not matter?
I think my first American Vogue was the one that you mentioned, which was Lucide La Falaise by Corinne with Camilla Nickerson.
Yeah.
And she's wearing quite pale clothes, and there's a carpet in the room, and it's just against a wall. And I'm pretty sure that was my first American Vogue story. And that was around the same time that Corinne did.
Right. Yeah, Take It Easy. And I'll tell you right now, that was Camilla.
Yeah.
James Brown was hair. It doesn't say, the model or anything.
That's Lucide La Falaise with the little short haircut. And I think that was, 92, 93, something like that?
It came out January 93. Okay, so you probably shot it the year before, yeah.
Yeah. So it was my first American Vogue story. And I hadn't done anything for English Vogue. And I hadn't done anything for any other big English magazines. My resume is a big word. To date, my work had been pretty much all independent magazines in England, ID and The Face, and those kind of things. And then other, whatever scrappy other bits and pieces. So Vogue was a big deal kind of thing to aspire to, but it was also the establishment. And in a certain kind of anarchic post-punky way, it was sort of the enemy.
Right.
Because I didn't really understand what it was. I knew what it was from a distance, and I understood probably, I guess, again, maybe through the European lens, was the importance of Italian Vogue.
Right.
Which is what really hit everyone, which hilariously was primarily an American product because of Mazel and Michel Compton. There were all even European photographers, but, it had that kind of big Hollywood quality about it.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because when Grace talks about Anna, she says Anna's the one that brought all the European photographers to Vogue when she took over. So isn't it funny how that seemed to be what Anna did different, was bring the Europeans. And then when you have Americans shooting, it's just when you think about what people thought were the changes that were happening,
Right.
when you're even thinking where the photographer's from as being something that even matters, right? Because
But it doesn't to anybody but us.
Right.
They don't
But it was a
care.
big deal that Grace mentioned it. She had already gotten all the European photographers to come with her.
Yeah.
Like, as
Well,
that being a big,
Also, at the same time, this is the kind of course, you're well aware of this, like that early 90s moment of friction was bizarre.
Yes.
So Corinne went to do stuff for American Vogue with Camilla, but David went to Bazaar because of Fabian and Calvin.
Right.
There's Tilberis helming that. So it was a little bit like the Liz and Grace show. So I did shed loads with Bazaar because of the Fabian, I think, connection. And all those photographers and people who are going there. And I didn't know, you would know this. I didn't do an American Vogue cover until way later with Cara Delevingne was my...
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the photographers that you've worked with, because you have very close relationships with a lot of them. And when I was even going through your listed work on models.com, especially with Vogue, it's a lot of Jamie Hawkesworth, right? It's Inez, it's Bruce, that Jennifer Lawrence cover with Bruce. I mean, it's across the board, but Jamie in particular, there's a lot. You did the Saoirse Ronan cover.
Yeah.
So it's the Jamie and Camilla team, which is an epic team. Very different from the typical Vogue team, but that's why it's really special. You can see when it's them. But I would love to hear about characteristics other than what we discussed before, which is kindness, but the characteristics that you love and you thrive under when it comes to the editor and the photographer. Phyllis Posnick talked about what she's learned is to really give hair and makeup time. Instead of looking at what they're doing and thinking they're not doing what you have in your mind, it's a process. Let them do their process. And sometimes it's better than what you had in your mind. So let everyone on set do what they do best.
That's the ideal. That's, the platonic ideal of the working relationship is for people to be able to do the thing they do that informs the picture, because that's ultimately what they're there for. So no grandstanding or hanging around forever or wait. Some people, some people in makeup and hair take forever, which is not always to the benefit, because you can, I remember we said it years ago, I'm sure some photographers were talking about how you lose the girl if they spend too long in the chair. You lose the feeling, the spirit. It's more difficult for actors or other performers, because that's not an ideal situation to keep it. If you probably don't get very much time with them in the first place, so please don't let them spend 2/3 of it in the chair.
Right.
So you tend to lose people if you hang around too long. But the best working relationships and working situations have been the ones where you do get to do the thing you're doing, and you kind of understand the destination. You understand the idea of what the picture wants to be or what it needs to be. And the great thing about working with someone like Jamie is he's very well prepared, and he has a very clear idea of how he sees something and what he sees and how he decides to construct a picture. But he also is very open to the accident. He's very open to the change of the light and the change of the mood, and just a little turn of the hand, or like in a way, he's a portraitist, even for a fashion picture. Or still, weirdly, even though they couldn't be more different, he puts me in mind a little bit of Mr. Penn, because Mr. Penn would do the thing where he would just go to set and just turn the model's arm ever so slightly. And Jamie will say, just lift a little finger.
Right. And that's why Phyllis says she has to dress head to toe. She learned that from Penn, because you never know. You have to be prepared for any angle. No clips in the back, because if he wants to get all of that. And it seems like a lot of the work that I've seen is natural light. Is there something, whether it's the photographers that love working with you, or it just seemed a lot of the Zoe Gertners, the Jamies, like this is a lot of natural light people.
That's a through line. And everyone who works with me knows I'm a pain in the ass about natural light. That's where I want to work. I want to work in a window. I will take people outside to do or finish the makeup, even in the dead of winter. I bring my own light, which I adjust to daylight time, to daylight balance. It's not ideal, but it's better than most studio lights. I'm really fixated about that. So yeah, daylight is a big thing for me. So I love working with people in daylight. I love to see people who shoot in daylight. Throwback, I like to work with people who shoot film because I don't want to see a monitor. I don't want to look at a monitor. I'm not interested.
Oh,
That's
and
yours.
yeah, Stefan said Tom Ford knew a lot about makeup. People have said that as a teacher, Mizell knows a lot about hair and makeup. Are there editors or photographers that you've actually learned to be a better artist from?
Yes, it's usually being engaged by an editor or a photographer who's like saying, what about is very useful. Why not? And what about are very, very useful ways to work. Because it's what I don't love, and not as many people maybe do it. Oh, I don't know. Actually, no, that's not true. I say not as many people do it now. I hate a mood board. Don't show me a mood board. Not interested. I don't need to see another amazing picture of another incredible person because I know that picture, surprisingly enough. I'm well aware of it. It doesn't help anybody. I think it sort of flattens creativity to look at other great work.
It's true.
It doesn't seem like something to aspire to at that point because then it becomes a competition or some kind of half-assed mimicry because you will not have every element in place to give you this feeling because a great photograph is a feeling.
Right. Not to mention for you, the color or shape of the woman's lip, all of that stuff.
Everything.
Right.
Yes, all of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
Well, you said that quote before about like saying about Kate. No, people aren't Kate.
Right.
People aren't Kate or Christy or Linda or Naomi or whoever else you throw in the mix. You need to approach each person as the current version of themselves that they will be in your picture, in your narrative, your story, your portrait, whatever they're going to be then. Which it doesn't necessarily mean that picture is going to be entirely new and no one's ever seen it before. It's going to be a revelation, but it's going to be its own picture.
Right.
Not the shadows. And the thing that makes me balmy is to see a fashion photograph and immediately read the reference. If I look at it and I go, oh, that's a picture of Daniele Luna. That's a picture of so-and-so. That's an Avedon. That's a pen. But that's Danny Lyons. That's Diane Arbus. That's whoever, Vivian Meyer,
Yeah, if you can see it, then it's not a reference.
Exactly. I had a great story one time. I was doing a thing with Avedon, name drop, doing a job with Avedon. And someone had said about a job they just did, whoever was on set was talking about it and saying, oh, we just did a picture of so-and-so. And it turned out to be, who is this now? I don't know who it was who was talking about it. It's covering my own ass. It was the picture of David Duchovny, I think was probably on Vanity Fair, and they put bees on him.
Of course,
yep. The American West. So the famous Avedon picture.
Yes, everyone does American West. American West is on everyone's mood board. It's so crazy.
All there. So this person said to Mr. Avedon, to his face, oh, we just did this homage to you. And he just tilted the head and then very gently said, oh, is that what they're calling it now? It's like, it's a ripoff.
That is so good.
Like,
yeah, an homage while they're still alive is a bit.
No. And it doesn't help. But
I've been fascinated to know when you look at a face. So I would imagine if I were a makeup artist, I'd be looking at the size of their eyelids, right? Like the size of the eye, obviously the skin. Do they have acne? Like, is the skin, because that's going to be your canvas. I have a bunch of canvases here. You put that first layer, right? To get a smooth. Yeah, exactly. Before you can paint. Yeah. And then there's the lip. Is it a full lip? What are the things you're looking for? Like, I hope I have, or does it not matter at all?
None of that matters.
Really?
Absolutely immaterial. None of it matters.
Oh,
to me at least.
Yeah.
I feel differently. This is a good thing. It's like I've knit myself into a self-perpetuating loop or something I genuinely believe. And I think it's something I genuinely believe. It does not matter. Because the face you have in front of you is the face the person has. And as soon as you start to see any aspect of a face as something in terms of proportion, or worse, correction or balance,
Right.
then you're fucked, because there's nothing there. You're already at a disadvantage.
Right. Okay. So you're not thinking, okay, she has almost no eyelids.
No,
So that
absolutely not. No. The most beautiful woman in the world is Charlotte Rampling, who has no eyelid. She has a very hooded eye. She always had. Actually, one weird thing, a hooded eye is something I'm mad about. Like, some of the faces I find the most beautiful have hooded eyes or single eyelids. So that's a thing that most makeup artists apparently don't like.
Well, you were talking in one of the interviews I was reading about the bags under the eyes, and I was like, oh, I wish that'd come back as like the cool thing. You're talking about the Helmut Newton girls and all of
or Peter Lindbergh, all the great beauties in the way that Peter addresses them and looks at them. It's like, Stefan didn't cover up the bags. I banged on about it for so many years. A couple of girls we had yesterday, very young, very beautiful, on ad job, and they're both obsessing about the bag or the shadow, the circle, I need the concealer, I need the highlight. And no. You drank the Kool-Aid. It's not a problem. The under eye is not the devil. It's a human face. There's a hole in your skull where your eyeball lives.
right.
You're a painter. You understand physiognomy.
Yeah. On one shoot we did with Annie Leibovitz and Phyllis, we did the cast of Behanding in Spokane, and Zoe Kazan was in it. She was the only female. And she said, don't cover up my bags. This is who I am. And I remember one cover that Peter actually shot of Marion Cotillard. It was her first cover, and the Vogue art department will be told to do a second round of retouching, which most of the time the photographer doesn't know, and definitely the talent doesn't. But when the cover came out, somehow we took it upon ourselves to airbrush off her beauty mark as if we were doing her a favor. So when I booked her again, it was, please don't take off my beauty mark.
Yeah.
If I wanted it off, I would have had it removed. So it's funny that those things. But okay, before we do our looking back, the philosophy and style, I've just been really fascinated by how you speak about your craft. You talk about makeup the same way great artists talk about their medium. It's both nothing and everything. You intentionally dismantle the idea of makeup as something fussy, performative. You'll say you should wear as little makeup as you can get away with, or joke about slapping something on in a bus smear. You don't talk about glam the way some makeup artists do. It's never about transformation for transformation's sake. Right. And yet, underneath all of your disarming wit, you have this reverent, almost mystical way of thinking about color and skin. You speak about red the way a poet might. And that's what you said earlier. Not just as a hue, but as a symbol that lives in memory and emotion, even in the physical world, like the blood in the slaughterhouse or Toro at the Tokyo Fish Market. Makeup to you is ephemeral, but not empty. It matters precisely because it doesn't last. There's something punk in that, something zen, something painterly. It's anti-perfection, but deeply considered. You're basically saying it's just makeup, but also it's everything. It's not about lipstick or eyeshadow. It's about how you see, and you see the world in light, texture, and mood. And two of my favorite quotes, and then I want you to kind of give us more about this. Color is just frequencies of light, and makeup is how we interpret those frequencies. Makeup is ephemeral. It is transparent. It is temporary. That's how I feel about my work. It's just a temporary condition. And I don't think it's possible to have a complete vision in such a temporary medium. And then you said, I'm not tied to it or any style really, even though I might be known for a certain kind of thing, it washes off. And the photographic proof is generally not mine. I'm not talking myself out of a job because I think that's the beauty of it, the freedom of it, that it doesn't last. So it's like, where does this come from? Or do you not know? It's such a different way. It's fascinating to me. It really is deep, but yet it's not. You know what I mean?
Deep and not is, those things that they're not contradictions. I said before, I was half joking about Simone de Beauvoir and the existentialist. It's the idea that these moments, I was thinking about how you can be somewhere, like it could be on a camping holiday or something, and you see something, the light does a thing. And then it can hit you then, or it can hit you later. You could be having a bath before bed and then think about what the light did.
Right.
Or there's stuff that you see, like in a Tarkovsky film. There's some great stuff in Tarkovsky films where the camera just sort of seems to be wandering at a certain time of day, and God knows how he did it. And then there's just something there that you kind of understand driving into where it's starting to get dark and the sun's just flashing behind the trees like that. And you can see the face in a certain way. I did one job a few years ago. Devin Garcia, the model, who I think is just so staggering looking. She looks like a film star to me. And I was leaving the studio. We were somewhere in Brooklyn, and Devin was leaving about the same time. And I was going one way. I guess I was going to the train, and she was going somewhere else. We had that thing where behind a car or a building or something, I kept catching sight of her from a distance. So seeing her out of context, having to spend the day with her, and seeing this beauty from a distance, I know the face. I had that kind of abstraction of the way that she looks, even though she'd washed her face and maybe just tied her hair up. That very affecting moment of what beauty can be and is and does to you, you know?
It almost seems like you have a photographer's eye too. You pick up on these things. Do you do your own photography?
Yeah, I've taken some pictures. Me and my husband James taken some pictures.
Yeah, just because you see things. But again, then I don't even know if you'd want to capture that moment the way you tell.
Well, some people can, clearly. Some people can capture William Eggleston, for example. I spent a little time with William Eggleston in Paris with Juergen and watching how he works. And he's seems to be very absent-mindedly taking a couple of pictures, like snaps, just like quite randomly in that way. And then there was a great interview with him where he talked about how someone said, you famously would take a few frames of something. And he said, well, how would I know which one was the better one if I took more?
Oh my God.
And that's the other thing I talk about, the way I work, depending on, of course, on the context. If I'm in a commercial situation, I'm here for what you need.
The hired help.
Hired help. I'm the staff. I'm staff. I can cook and clean. But depending on what's going down in the work, I know when to stop. I know not to get in my own way or to get in the way of the face that I'm working with. Endless fuss.
Is there disappointment attached to that when you do have to stop?
No, not at all. I'm never happier than if I've just put a little bit of grease on someone's eyes and just rub some lipstick on the cheeks or something, and that's the moment and that's the picture,
right?
The engagement, and I can do a full beat. And Paul Kavako was the one who said to me, like, you may not need to do everything, but you should be able to.
Right.
So I can turn it out if I need be. My heart's not in it necessarily. Right. It might be in the deconstructed version. It might be in the half-done version.
In the process of it.
The moment of it, that's my favorite thing about my work. This is a funny thing to me. The absolute best part of my job is the bit when I'm painting.
The process, that's Jackson Pollock, right?
And I'm entirely for this moment. And I'm not going to go and lock myself in the toilet if that doesn't become the face for the picture or whatever. I'm not that invested. I might have been, maybe in my early 20s when I started, I might have been, everything was riding on this moment. But no, I'm not sure if it was.
Right, exactly. That's the thing. You thought it was, yeah.
So the fact of the moment of touching the face, this thing happens with a color. This thing happens with a line. Years ago, do you know Linda Barry, the cartoonist? And she used to suck for a British voice called Ernie Pook's Comique. She's a really amazing cartoonist and artist. And she also teaches a writing class. And me and James went to Chicago one weekend to do a writing class with her. And she was the one who really cemented in my mind this idea of the importance of the hand-eye connection, which is in the painting. And her thing, when you're writing, she gives you a time frame of 1, 2, 3 minutes to write a short story or something. And if you get blocked or you get stuck, do not stop moving your pen. Draw concentric circles. Keep moving. The same thing I feel about phone doodles. Draw on everything in sight. Any piece of paper.
That's what I do, yeah.
Draw on something. That's where you come from. There's art back there. Idle hands. You cannot do it. You cannot. This is part of my, again, reactive analog brain against this AI, superficiality, interpretive, whatever the fuck you want to call it, correction, perfection, invention of beauty or some obscure version of idealized beauty. It's just not very interesting to be holding things at arm's length or creating things outside the realm of something that you can smell. Because you know what ink smells like when you're painting something.
Right.
I use a Japanese sumi ink block. You know, when you grind the ink onto the stone, that ink's quite a strong smell. There's something nice about that moment of dipping the brush in the ink and then like wiping it off on the side, and then you have that smell of the ink and the way it feels and the sound of the brush on the paper.
Right, of course.
Versions of that with something how Guerlain smells like violets, or the old Chanel used to smell like a certain way. And there's a kind of these olfactory connections to the look and smell and feel and touch and texture of everything of makeup. You can't abstract yourself from whatever the analog is.
Right. No, it's true. And for you, I was just thinking, it's not like you can plan, and it's not like you know what's going to happen, because you're layering, you're doing things onto, it's never going to be exactly the same again. So don't hold on to it.
No. It'll never be the same. You can do the
It'll
same
never be
every day, and it'll never be the same. This is part of my fascination with continuity in films, because I can't not see it. If I'm watching a
me
film,
too.
I'm just like,
Me too. There's this one film that, and I said to Ben Mendelsohn when he came in to meet me, because people get annoyed because I bring it up to the actors. I go, you had an ice cream cone, and then it was melting, and then it was an ice cream cone again. He goes, oh my God, I know, it was so hot where we were filming. And then I always do it with that film, Never Let Me Go, because the young kid playing Andrew Garfield is a lefty and Andrew's a righty. And I'll see it right away. It's so crazy.
So something like that I could explain to myself, because I would say, you know what? No, I bet Ishiguro had that in mind. I bet Ishiguro had that idea, but these people were created, and they would be trained out of using the left hand into the right hand, because they're going to be donors for their bodies, and
right.
They have to be right-handed.
That's true. Oh, wow. That's a good one. But Carrie Mulligan said to me, do not bring that up, because I was watching a panel and I had to tell her. And anyway, so I'm taking up so much of your time. This has been amazing, and I have so many more questions, but let's just look back. So usually I would ask my guest what advice it would give to the next generation of artists. But just being here, you have so much invaluable advice, and through different interviews have given such invaluable advice. So I'm going to read you some of my favorites. I mean, your quotes are just like incredible.
I can refute them. I can deny everything.
So you did say the best advice I ever got was from Paul Cavaco.
Yes.
You may not have to do everything, but you should be able to.
Yeah.
Another piece of advice you've given: be professional, punctual, polite, and a good team player. Learn to be a small part of a great picture rather than another big part of a lousy picture.
Yes.
And along with that, you're not the center of the universe. You have to work as a team. If you can't, your career will implode. Mm-hmm. So anything else that you've kind of learned along the way for that kid that might be working in a slaughterhouse right now that wants to be like you? What should he do? She, he, them?
Whoever they are. It's such a weird idea to think about, like, how that might happen, because living in a world now where everything, the immediacy and availability of everything is quite difficult. So I'm not sure how easy it is or how impossible it is to forge your own path and to understand what you really have in mind and what you think. Because maybe not, I would think would have been very useful to me to understand a bit more, not necessarily clearly, but just to understand what I had in mind, or the feeling I could bring to something, as woolly as it sounds. What's the most beautiful and most engaging and most interesting, exciting thing to me that I can do? And if it is transformation, if it is entirely a new world, that borderline prosthetic into special effect, whatever, then go for it and learn everything and get technically adept to be able to do that thing. But if you truly believe that you are at heart a watercolorist, that you have a soft touch, there's something in simplicity, or there's something you can do, if it's even possible to live and work in that way now, to be able to do that, to understand entirely how you feel honestly about it. Because it's happened with the celebrity thing, and it happened a lot with over a period before everyone got like the guard dog publicists, when people were a little bit like unguarded and just throwing themselves at stuff. I'm not great at the high glamour, super transformation-y perfection thing. I can do it, but it's not.
Is that like a Kevin Aquan?
Yeah, the erasure and repainting, which is an extraordinary skill, which I don't have. Or I have, but you don't want to wait for me to turn it.
You're not interested in it enough to...
No, the thing that sort of pushes the person further away from you into this perfected, idealized something of beauty, which is not where my heart is. But at the same time, I do like a big look. I don't mind when someone looks berserk or extremely glamorous, or I like the madness of it, and I can do that, wholeheartedly. But it's not about flawlessness.
Right.
There's another, one of my quotes, which you may or may not have turned up, was I said, this is probably when I was working in Japan a lot, was to say, I think it's really important to embrace the idea that the absence of flaws does not make something beautiful.
Right. Listen, I wish all young women, this is just the opposite of what they're seeing from the Kylies, this bombardment of this is what it is. And it's like you should go around to talk at schools. To have someone like you that have worked with the most beautiful, whatever beautiful means, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
whatever
it's
it means,
in the eye of the beholder. It's what makes you feel. That's why they say that. It's in the eye of the beholder, because something that's beautiful to me may not it's likely not beautiful to someone else. And they call it a universal beauty. But still, what is that? But to just kind of break all that back down and deconstruct it for these kids that are seeing only one thing, and for some reason we're all.
I used to do in my training sessions in Japan or for other things with assistants, and I Shiseido across the board. I worked with Shiseido for a long time. And I would constantly say, just think about how things fall culturally and in the realm of theatre and film and pop culture. That Sigourney Weaver and Sean Young were two women very popular at a certain period who had thin lips and wore red lipstick and looked a certain way. Of course, raving, tearing beauties, incredible beauties. Can we imagine that someone who looks like this now is going to go and get these lip things done? Because that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
To throw the proportion of a face off in such a strange way. And it wouldn't have occurred to people at that point.
Never. Never.
About the torment that the black girls I went to school with growing up, the awful racism of being like tormented for having big lips. That was a very common racial slur in the 70s. People nagging about the size of someone's lips. And these same girls now grown into adult women who are having lip fillers all the time.
It's true. It's a great way of thinking about it. And this is digressing, but when celebrities became the new cover girls, was that more interesting to you?
Well, no, because that's not how I think about.
Oh, right.
This is a tricky thing because
it is.
Some of the performers I've worked with who talk about that. They say, like, default position, I wouldn't be here if I worked in the supermarket. I'm here because I just made a film with X or whatever I was doing. And so you have been invited into the room because you are doing this particular thing, not because you have been recognized as a great beauty.
It's true.
And sometimes they have been recognized as a great beauty and sometimes they haven't. I was talking to Paul Cavaco years ago. We were talking about who do you want to put on the cover of Allure next? Who would be your dream? And I said, Kathy Bates. Because she's so incredible and so
right,
and the work is so cool and she's so good. You can't take your eyes off her, and she's this fascination. And I think about all the theater actors and the performers and the people who's like, I'm of course obsessed with Glenda Jackson because that was like great in film growing up and saw her on stage, and luckily enough to see her towards the end of her life in Three Tall Women and in both versions of King Lear in London and in New York, who never had any work done, haggy old woman, just brilliant. Whatever versions of the beauty that you admire or drawn to that come as part of a package of the entire person, where what we do in our two-dimensional world is very reductive, and it's how the person appears to you, to sell you the top of the skirt that we talked about before, versus the actor performer who is there to shill for their film or whatever going down.
No, and you have the beautiful people or the Hunter Schafer who don't want to be considered that, right? But anyway. Okay, so at the end of each episode, I ask 7 rapid fire questions. They're the same. They're very easy. This or that. Okay. AM or PM?
AM.
Text or talk?
Preferably talk.
Uber or Subway?
Preferably Subway.
Book or film?
Oh, that's not fair.
You could do both if you want. Some people have.
Yeah, but it can't be. Yeah.
Sweet or spicy?
Spicy.
Spots or stripes?
I don't understand that one.
Polka dots or stripes? I see as stripes for some reason.
Stripes, I guess.
It's a visual thing. I don't know.
I suppose.
Right. Top or bottom, and not sexual. It's just top or bottom.
That's too vague. Sorry, no, that's
okay. Well, I always think of it as top or bottom, but Phyllis and Grace are both top. So, and then I just have Just one just for you. Top model or top chef?
Oh, Lord. Well, it's a chef, obviously.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you. I love this. It's so much to think about. You can almost go down the rabbit hole like I did for 8 hours.
I'm sorry about that. I hope it was worth it.
No, but it's fascinating. And it's undoing what I've been used to in the work I do, right? So I have to change the whole way to think about it, to understand. To really be able to see through your eyes, I'd have to undo my learnings.
Well, also, this is a mirror for me as well. I mean, of course, I've done interviews and I've talked to people about my work before, but it's generally in the service of a specific product or something. So I don't hear myself coming back to me and sometimes thinking it sounds more or less absurd. And sometimes I'm actually making a bit more peace with myself about how I think about things. But I have always thought, or often thought, that part of my thing is to avoid committing to something, which of course you can't really commit to something that comes off in the wash. So you've kind of proved that to me.
Yeah. Amazing.
Confirmation bias.
Well, thank you. And we'll be in touch soon.
All right.
Okay, have a great day.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, bye. Okay, that's our show. Thanks for listening to Going Rogue. And be sure to like and subscribe. Today's show is produced by me and Maddie Rosenberg at Radio Free Rhinecliff with assistance from Maddie Kelly. Special thanks to David Vo for our great graphics and Taras Romanov for our epic theme music. See you next Friday.